Test, test, test. Testing. 1, 2, 3, test. One, two, three, test. Hello. Test, test, test. Hello. Test, test, test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to the July 1st, 2019 meeting of the Shawnee Planning Commission. We'll start with roll call. Commissioner Montgomery.
Here.
Commissioner Roth.
Here.
Commissioner Peterson.
Here.
Commissioner Willoughby.
Here.
Commissioner Beanhoff.
Here.
Commissioner Busby is here. Commissioner Wise is absent. Commissioner Braley.
Here.
Commissioner Les Smith. Here. Thank you. Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The consent agenda items 1 through 3 are listed under the consent items agenda. Unless there is a request to remove the items from the consent agenda, the items will be approved in one motion. Is there a request to remove the items from the consent agenda? Commissioner Peterson.
I have a question on item
Very fine. That's been removed, and that's item number which one? 3. Very good. Commissioner Beanhoff.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, request to remove item number 2 from the consent agenda. The staff has additional information for us.
Very fine. Thank you. Since those 2 items have been removed, is there a motion to approve the final consent agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting? Commissioner Braley?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting of June 17th, 2019.
Is there a second? Commissioner Montgomery?
I second the motion.
Motion and a second to approve the Planning Commission meetings of the previous meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. If we'll proceed, if we'll take the Bruce Beanhoff asked for SP 16-1907 to be removed because staff has a comment on it, if you'd please.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify, when I spoke to the applicant earlier today, she said they'd actually like to go with a gray colored awning instead of the blue awning that you saw in your report. So I just want to make sure that the Planning Commission's okay with that change and that we have that on the record.
Thank you. Since the applicant isn't here, I don't believe. Is the applicant here? Right. If you come forward and state your name and address.
My name is Chris Armour. I'm at, what's my address? 5017 West 67th Terrace in Prairie Village. 66 Terrace? Yeah, that's where we live. I've only been there a couple months, years. I'm on the board for MTKC. I'm also the architect that has presented previous drawings.
Thank you, Mr. Armour. I presume you're in agreement with staff recommendations on this?
Yes.
And the only change happens to be strictly the color?
Color.
Does the commission have any questions for applicant or staff? Commissioner Beanhoff.
Question for staff. Would ask, are you in agreement that the color chosen, I don't see a sample that we have to look at, is complementary to the project?
Yes, I think the gray tone is actually a little bit more obviously neutral than the blue. The building does have some blue painted on it, so either one I think would look fine. Originally they did want to go with the blue, but showed us both options, so that's why we included the blue in the staff report.
Thank you.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, Commissioner Roth.
Just a question on the construction of this. It looks like it's a temporary structure of some sort. Is there going to be some kind of structural calculations done on it? I'm just thinking with wind loads and stuff like that.
Well, it'll be a pre-engineered system, so
Okay.
that'll be done by the fabricator.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be a standard awning type of thing you would see on any other type of awning on a building. So it'll be engineered by the manufacturer.
Thanks.
Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, we'd be in commission discussion. Hearing no discussion, would someone care to make a motion? Commissioner Montgomery?
I move for approval of SP 16-19-07, site plan approval for B&B Walkway Canopy at 16301 Midland Drive, per staff recommendations.
Commissioner Montgomery, could you also add that it's in notation to the change in color?
And accepting the change in color.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Roth?
I'll second the motion.
Your motion is second to approve SP 161907, site plan approval for B&B Walkway Canopy at 16301 Midland Drive, per staff recommendations and per the change in color scheme. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is FP 081907, final plat approval for Lakepointe 11th plat located in the 5900 block of Woodstock Street. Commissioner Peterson, you had a question?
This would be for staff, and I apologize for not getting over to the office today to ask this, so it's not on the minutes, but Clear Creek Parkway, I believe, is the street that it abuts. I just know that right now it is a minor arterial service collector. The next grade up, and after that, I know that this area is experiencing some growth, and have we taken a look at if that street is going to be expanded at any time, and that we're going to have to then come back and barter for land from several people instead of one, or anything like that? I just am unaware.
Mark Zilsdorf, City Planning staff. No, the classification of the street through there, Clear Creek Parkway, it's not anticipated to be widened in any way. Over time, it may carry a little bit more traffic, but this section of Clear Creek Parkway is pretty much to the point where it's fully developed on both sides of it. Staff does not anticipate it being widened to multiple lanes to where they would need additional lighting.
I am assuming the applicant is not here on this one. Is the applicant here? I think it's kind of redundant, but it doesn't hurt if you'd come up and state your name and address.
Good evening, Dave Rennie with Schlegel & Associates, 14920 West 107th Street. We're here on behalf of the applicant, Lakepointe Developers, and we're in agreement with the staff report and stipulations.
Thank you very much. Does the commission have any questions for the applicant or staff? Any other questions for the applicant or staff? Commissioner Peterson.
It's not actually a question. I just wanted to thank Mark and the applicant for answering that question. I apologize for not getting over to the office to have a discussion about this prior.
No problem at all.
I have an odd question, I think, and that is somewhere in the notes I'm seeing that there's trees that were supposed to be planted along there and haven't. Is that correct? Mark?
Yes, that is correct. There's the two open space. It's kind of a long story, but in the end, the developer did not plant the trees within these tracts as he was required to do. So there are still a series of street trees along Clear Creek Parkway that need to be planted. It's my understanding that the developer is working with the property owners, and I believe he may be installing those once this gets resolved. Correct. Or at least giving the property owners the money. So part of the problem has to do with the areas having an irrigation system in them, but the water was cut off to the irrigation system. The meter was locked where they couldn't irrigate those tracts. So he had delayed planting the trees in there so they could get this.
So the applicant and/or the developer and/or the landowners will take care of putting the trees in.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it's a stipulation of our plat approval that the trees will be planted prior to recording the plat at the county.
Oh, terrific. Thank you very much. Any other questions for applicant or staff? If not, we'd be in commission discussion. Would someone care to make a motion? Commissioner Peterson.
I move that we approve FP-08-19-07 final plat approval for Lakepointe 11th plat located in the 5900 block of Woodstock Street per staff instructions and this evening's clarifications.
Is there a second? Commissioner Braley.
I'd like to second that motion.
There's a motion and a second for approval of FP 081907, final plat approval for Lakepointe 11th plat located in the 5900 block of Woodstock Street per staff recommendations and clarification. Any other comments? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you. That puts us to new business, which I'm beginning to learn this number really, really well. PUD 011906 is basically, we're changing that to be tabled till August 5th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. And I believe, if what I hear is correct, that the developer has had a long conversation with the residents out there, and they're working to see if they can come to a little closer agreement, so that both sides will be satisfied. And if that's the case, that's a very good reason for me to say I'm very happy that they're delaying it until August 5th meeting. So we need a motion to table it. Commissioner Montgomery.
I'd make a motion that we, in regard to PUD-01-19-06, that we table the rezoning from PUDMR to PUDMR and preliminary development plan related to the Woodstonia West multifamily development, 5100 to 5300 blocks of Woodstonia Drive, tabled until the August 5th, 2019 meeting.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Commissioner Beanhoff.
Second that.
There's a motion and a second for delaying or tabling PUD 011906 until the August 5th, 2019 Planning Commission meeting. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Other business. The staff has a proposal for staff amendments for lane uses and public notices. Staff.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Stephanie Malmborg with the Community Development Department. And I have a quick little PowerPoint about some of the text amendments we'd like to make to the zoning ordinance. We're actually looking at land uses, definitions, and approval processes. Two of those will be a little bit quicker turnaround than the other. So first of all, table of uses. We're proposing a couple corrections and additions to our table of uses. This was outlined in your short memo that we included in the packet tonight, but just wanted to go over it tonight in case you have any questions. We want to clarify that in TSQ, Town Square Zoning District, we are going to prohibit automobile service center and maintenance. I believe this was intended to be prohibited in a previous text amendment, and for whatever reason, it just wasn't added at that time. So I think there's a pretty consistent movement with not having this type of use in our downtown area, and we just want to make sure that it is indeed added to the prohibited land uses category. The second one is adding furniture retail with a limitation on size so that we kind of break that up into plus or minus 20,000 square feet and open that up with the smaller size store to be allowed as a special use in the PO district. We do have some interest in some PO zoned properties that have come up, and they kind of want to do something like this. And generally a retail showroom that's less than 20,000 square feet doesn't have the kind of need for parking like a Nebraska Furniture Mart or something larger than that. So on a case-by-case basis with a special use permit, we could then potentially approve a furniture store in a PO area if there was a certain site that would work for it. Any questions?
I have a couple.
Mhm.
All right. The prohibit automotive service center maintenance, isn't Donovan's in this area?
Mhm.
So they would be grandfathered in?
Correct. There just wouldn't be any new
And obviously would be in the future, but if he were to sell the business, would that business still be legal non-conforming? And I ask that because with the kind of equipment he has in there, are we putting a bit of a strain on him?
It's no different than any other legal non-conforming use in the downtown area. For instance, the pot and pan manufacturer across the way, if they were to go out, manufacturing's not allowed. They're legal non-conforming now. But they would be allowed to be out of business, have a cessation in use for up to a year. Basically, up to a year they can set vacant. But if it lasts longer than a year, like the OK Garage, it becomes illegal and non-conforming. So that's kind of where we're at with that business because it's been out for over a year and a half now.
Thank you, Doug. Commissioner Beanhoff.
Just a quick clarification on that. So if Donovan sold to someone else, they could continue to operate in that location?
That's correct. We could change the sign and continue to operate in perpetuity. It would just be if they stopped working as an automotive repair business for a year continually, then it would be no longer legal.
The other question is the smaller furniture stores, a special use permit for them?
Just in the PO zoning district. Right now, it's not allowed at all in the PO district. And because we've had some interest in some smaller scale type furniture stores, for those specific sites, it might be appropriate on a case-by-case basis. So a special use permit seemed acceptable to staff.
Very fine. Commissioner Peterson.
I don't think we currently have it defined in definitions, but since we are proposing to make some edits to a definition, I'd be happy to come up with a very clear definition for a furniture store.
Commissioner Peterson, are you suggesting that used furniture stores or something like that is not in that particular? I mean, that's a discussion we should have so they know what our feelings will be.
I think it all depends on the concept, whereas if, not that we don't all need to buy mattresses, but I'd really not like to see another mattress store pop up in next to a dentist office or something like that. It's not, I don't think that was what our intent was, number one. Number two, I was just curious about furniture. I mean, if somebody had a consignment shop where they sold, where they had booths and people redecorated furniture or sold, you know, upscale secondhand, is that considered a furniture store? I don't know. So I would like to have clarification what our intent is so that we don't confuse our people as well.
Staff, does that help you?
It does. I think the intent is more of a traditional place that has more than just mattresses. It has more of a variety. So I can try and come up with a better definition to clarify that that's the intent. Do you have a certain feeling about used versus new furniture, just so I can get a feel for what you think is appropriate?
I think the furniture I'm thinking about more in the less than the 20,000 square feet would be more along the lines of boutique-like items rather than a Macy's outlet. And I don't mean to knock any particular store, it's just the store that came to mind type of thing. And our appliances considered furniture. If you're looking at a building code.
Does it make sense that since this is a special use permit that we would have the advantage of saying that we don't want used furniture, but we like antiques, but newer antiques, we don't like used furniture? I mean, are we getting into a point when we're trying to?
I think we're muddying the waters because
Yeah,
there's also
I think I'm understanding what you're saying, and we would have more control with the special use permit, but I think our level of opinion is more of a boutique, like what you're talking about, where you have a furniture store that actually has display areas. You have room setups, those kind of things, not necessarily a Bed Bath & Beyond or something, Macy's that becomes more retail oriented. There'll be retail sales there, obviously, as a furniture store, but the intent is to get people in the store and move them through displays and have items for sale that are really displayed and staged, if you will, as rooms are in a home. That's kind of what we're thinking in terms of a boutique furniture store. And we'll create a definition for that.
Right.
Thank you. Then I guess we're on to the next, which is what the proposed amendments to definitions.
Yes. So we're at this time proposing one amendment to definitions, and now in addition to the furniture store, so we'll have a couple, which is good. It rounds it out. If you see any others, let me know. But enforcement officer is one that we saw a few days ago, actually, when we were looking at a specific proposal come through, and it was referenced in the code, and we found that it's defined as any person employed by the city or an officer of the city. And we just thought we should narrow that down to the director of community development so that we don't have someone in public works or parks that by code has the authority to make a decision on the zoning ordinance. So just a clarification in this case.
Yeah, it's funny because there's an old story about somebody, a city councilman member years ago, field okaying some things, and I think that probably fit in this definition. You remember that one, Doug? Any question for Commissioner Peterson?
I'm just curious. I like the fact that we're narrowing this and being a little more specific, but I know that Mr. Allman has his hands full being the person to do this, and I didn't know if we wanted to, or if we even have an assistant director or under title, just to, it obviously maybe depends on the level of involvement that we're talking about here, but yes, please. I just don't know if Doug never gets to take a vacation as it is. He'll never be able to get out of the office.
I appreciate that. For setting it up in terms of the community development director or the designee, I would likely be designating that. A lot of these zoning violations and things actually go through code enforcement, so I would often designate our code enforcement supervisor, Kevin Messick, to take action. In this case, I would normally, when we're talking about that we found this, Stephanie would be designated. It's not uncommon in our municipal code to have designees. The city engineer often designates qualified PEs to make judgments on plans and those kind of things, and this is very similar to that. But I do appreciate your sentiments.
Stephanie, please go ahead.
Okay, last one, and this is the little bit bigger project. Doug thinks I'm a little crazy, but I'd like to go through and make sure that our approval processes are very clear, very legal, and the most efficient. And I don't think they've been updated in quite a while. And we originally were looking at this because of some legal notice requirements through the state legislature. I was working with the city attorney to make sure that do we need to include legal descriptions in our public notices that go in the newspaper? Kansas law actually says no, so we can save quite a bit of money by not including them in our newspaper notices and having all the extra words. So just going through and making sure that little things like that get cleaned up, that'll make us more efficient with our processes, and maybe restructuring these a little bit more to be more clear, because there's some areas of certain sections that just need to be more consistent in saying how the approval is done. So this will take a little bit of time because it's a lot more intense than the two previous text amendments we mentioned tonight.
So we shouldn't expect anything on that for several months at least. Is that about right?
I would say in the fall you'll see this. The other two I'd like to have for you in August, most likely, maybe at that August 5th meeting if it's not too full already. But we'll see what we can do.
Any questions for staff on that? Commissioner Peterson?
Yeah. We can certainly look into that. I'm not aware of any at this time, but there's got to be something out there because everything gets on the internet somehow. So I'm happy to take a look.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, I believe there was an effort in the state legislature to allow online postings on city websites in lieu of publication newspaper. But I would need to check this, but I'm pretty sure that that legislation fell because of the newspaper lobby. They did win that, and so we still, I think, are by statute still obligated to notify the local paper. One thing Stephanie mentioned that would be great is that we are not required by law to put in some of these meets and bounds legal descriptions. In some cases, cost us $200 or $300 to publish. And so by simplifying those publications, we're going to save the taxpayers considerable money in doing this. We'll check it out. Yeah, we'll check with Alice too, Alice Rainey, make sure we're doing it legally. But as she said, we're having a new set of eyes on our zoning code. She's seen things in a good way. There are some clarifications and things in terms of approvals that they're interpretive. I think they're there. They've been there the 20 years I've worked here, but to have it cleaned up and specific if we were ever to end up in litigation, I think is a really good idea. And it's a big job for her, and I appreciate her taking it on.
One other thing I wanted to mention in the lines of public notices, we are looking at redesigning our signs that we're putting at properties for public hearings, so you may see some changes to those in the future as well.
Does the commission have any further questions for staff on this? Do you want separate motions on this or just one motion, Stephanie?
Just one's fine.
Basically a motion to proceed with the work. Commissioner Beanhoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would make a motion that we authorize the planning department to proceed with drafting a text amendment and reviewing the plans as submitted in the memo, with the additions to definition of furniture and other items that might be appropriate.
Is there a second? Commissioner Braley.
I'll second that motion.
There's a motion and a second to have to approve staff's plans to change text amendments and clean up some other stuff that they so thoroughly have told us. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Does the staff have anything else for the commissioners? Does the commission have anything else for staff? Commissioner Montgomery.
I have a question about the quorum. Did staff determine the 2 vacancies that we have on the commission, how that affects our quorum?
Probably before we have a member, either the first meeting in August or the second meeting in August.
Thank you.
We're back to the weight game.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Rayleigh.
I'd like to make a motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Is there a second? Commissioner Les Smith.
Second.
The motion is second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We're done. Thank you.
Augie.